Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. Darren Mitchell here, and I just said to my guests that I'm about to put my radio voice on and get really serious, but we've just spent 20 minutes talking about lots of interesting things, which we probably will not reveal on this particular episode because there could be some sensitive topics there. But I'm absolutely ecstatic to be joined by a lady called Leslie. Now, I didn't even ask you, Leslie, in terms of how to pronounce your surname correctly, so I'm going to make an Aussie guess. Now, the way that we would say it in Australia would be Venetz, but I'm sure it's something like Venetz.
No, you would be correct.
Correct.
You would be Venetz. That's exactly right. I say it's like a Venn diagram plus an etz, a Venetz. But
Venetz.
I will say, so I grew up in Montana, which is like a state right below Canada. So I have like sort of this like Western Canadian accent. And then I moved to Chicago, which Chicago has like a very specific accent. But then I spent almost my entire professional career working for British companies. So I talk weird.
You talk weird. According
Sometimes
to who?
I listen back to myself on
Oh.
podcasts, and even I'm like, what word was that?
It's very interesting. But it means that you are individual. It's eclectic.
Yes.
Different.
Yes. If somebody tried to play me on TV, they would have to do deep character study to get my accent right. That's for darn sure.
Because it's very, very different. British company, brought up in Montana, which I think from memory is Brendan Burchard country, and then Chicago, Illinois, which is Blues Brothers country.
It is Blues Brothers country.
But hey, just spare a thought for us Aussies down here, because when Australians talk, most people think, are you from England? Or are you from South Africa?
Oh, rude. Well, I used to have a colleague that was a Kiwi, and I knew he really hated it when people asked him if he was Australian, and I didn't like him. So I went out of my way to tell people that he was Australian and that he loved to talk about it.
Love it. Well, it's just like Australians talking to North Americans and Canadians. You've got to be very careful as to what you say. So I now just say, so where are you from? Oh, I'm from Toronto.
Smart. Wise. Yes, wise. Wise play, Darren. Wise play.
Man, awesome. Hey, I just noticed also that you are a LinkedIn top voice. You're the founder of Sales-Led GTM Agency, and well, you've been a co-author, but now a newly published author of a book soon to be released. In fact, it'll be coming out on the 5th of August. Profit Generating Pipeline: A Proven Formula to Earn Trust and Drive Revenue. So, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the launch. We're going to talk about the key topics. First question I want to ask you, because I love to delve into your background, is how did you find the experience being an author? Obviously, being a co-author is one thing, but being an author for yourself now, how was the experience for you?
Multifaceted. It was so interesting because I started writing the book because a mentor of mine kind of called me out. Like, he was like, I'm so surprised you haven't written a book. And I said, like, me, does my voice even matter? Would people even read it? Hasn't everything already been written? And he was like, are you out of your mind? Like, first of all, no, everything hasn't already been written. Like, you have a really unique stack of experiences and expertise. Plus, even if it was the same as somebody else's, like, nobody has written it from your point of view. And I was just like, oh, I don't know. And he challenged me to pull all of the books off my bookshelves and find all of the ones that had been written by women in sales or women in business even. And like, I am somebody that prides myself on like, making sure to amplify the voices of other women in sales and women of business and like, people of color in sales. And it was three books, and you can't see my bookshelves, but they are brimming. And so it was this moment of sort of being called to the carpet and being like, okay, you aren't walking it like you talk it. Like, you aren't learning from as like the set of diverse voices that you want to be learning from. And
Yeah.
you immediately, like, I put the kibosh on myself. Like, nobody told me that I couldn't be a writer. Like, I was already telling myself that my voice didn't
Mm.
matter. So that was probably like 6 years ago. But that really was this catalyst moment of planting the seed that maybe I should write a book. And
Yeah.
then as I was doing the work, like the work that I do at sales and go-to-market agency, the advisory work on outbound as like a passion project side hustle. And then definitely as I transitioned it into my full-time job, it required me to really crystallize my thinking and my process and my frameworks in a way that I had never really done before.
Yeah.
And that's where I got to the point that I was like, oh, like I really do have a book here. But even then, Darren, I'll have to tell you, like it was an emotional process to come to
Hmm.
terms with putting that much of myself onto paper and then like giving it to people and hoping
Yeah.
that they like it. I think like getting over the emotional hurdle was hard. The writing was fine. Like it wasn't easy, but
Mm.
I wouldn't describe it as hard. And then the actual work of like editing and launching has been extraordinarily like difficult doesn't sound right, but like it's
Challenging.
a lot of freaking work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and sometimes people look at it and say, "Wow, here's a because we talked about a book from one of your colleagues already called the B2B Sales Playbook. And sometimes we look at a book that's completed, and I'm sure people will do this with your book. They'll see it and say, "Oh, that's a fantastic book. I'll read it," and maybe not having any real deep comprehension as to what goes into that book. And as you talked about, there could be fear, uncertainty, and doubt that you have. It could be, is my message going to resonate? Is my message relevant to the marketplace? Am I relevant? All these questions that happen, which basically translates to a salesperson or a sales leader every single day, probably asking the same questions about themselves. And so one of the big things we probably have to get used to is getting over ourselves and saying, you know what, I am good enough. I do have the capability, and removing ourselves from the pressure of having to get the perfect outcome. Because I guarantee you, Leslie, there'll be people that pick up your book, just like this book, and they'll say, but that's okay. They're probably not your market. But the ones that do pick it up and pick one thing up and do something, you are going to be like the oracle to them. And that is why you do
You nailed it with the word perfect too.
it.
That like it doesn't have to be perfect because it's impossible for it to be perfect. Like a perfect thing doesn't exist.
Mm,
It's did I write something that I deeply believe in? And am I confident, like 110% confident that that knowledge has the power to change somebody's life?
yes,
Yes.
yes. So would you say that this book, because I want to delve into a little bit of your background and what led you to this, would you say that this book is, and I don't want to sound too grandiose here, but it's the manifestation of your life's work up until
No,
this point? No, cool.
no. No, I think it's the first book on my bookshelf of
Yes.
books that I will author.
Nice.
It's really specific to top of funnel. I love, love, love top of funnel. Which is like I'm not sure I even knew that about myself
Okay.
maybe 5 years ago. Like I
Yeah.
had done it my entire career. I was skilled at it. I had a lot of expertise benched in it, but I don't think that 5 years ago, if somebody was like, your thing, like your gift is going to be sharing top of funnel excellence with the world, that I would have been like, sure, that tracks. So it is,
Okay.
right? So it is the thing that I am most focused on right now, where I see a tremendous amount of like frustration. Like people are really, really struggling because it is
Hmm.
extraordinarily difficult to earn the attention of prospects right now.
Yep.
So it is the right book for the right moment.
Perfect. Perfect. So if we go back a bit, you've had a pretty long and distinguished career within sales, been with some big brands, got some big iconic brands into your portfolio. Where did it all start for you? And I think you mentioned it before and saying that there's not a lot of women in sales that write a lot of books, right? And historically, rightly or wrongly, it's probably been a male-dominated industry. But where did it all start for you? And was there something that was the catalyst for you to move into sales leadership, and then into what you're doing today? Because I'm always intrigued in terms of whether there was a specific event or was it something more of an evolution?
Oof. I think more of an evolution. I fell in love with sales against my will, and I stayed in sales because I am stubborn. I I really thought sales was so gross. So gross. And I only took a sales job because I thought I'll do this for a little while until something better comes along.
Yeah.
But it was the only job where I had control over how much money I made. So like I'd moved from Montana to Chicago. So from like a town of 60,000 to the city of 6 million without a job. I'm interviewing. These
Hmm.
jobs are offering me like 25, 28, 30K a year with like maybe you'll get a promotion if you do everything right and it's up to 3%. And I was just like, no, no, no,
No.
thank you. Like that doesn't sound appropriate. Like that doesn't sound like an appropriate reward for what I know I'm bringing to the table, which, maybe I was naive in my early 20s, but based on the revenue that I've closed and the results I brought in for organizations, I think it was benched in some truth. And
Mm.
so instead of taking those 30K jobs, I turned them down and I took a job with an 18K base
Yep.
salary. Like I was literally skipping meals, like couldn't afford the 225 for the train until my next paycheck cleared because I was so confident that I possessed the grit and the tenacity and the skill sets to be able to make a heck of a lot more than 30K. And I did. In my first
Yep.
year, I made 56K. So
Nice.
like almost doubled the sort of top echelon that those folks were offering. But that doesn't mean that it was easy. Like
Yeah.
like sales came pretty naturally to me.
Hmm.
I would say like within 2 months, I went from being like, ew, this is really gross. And I'm like embarrassed to be in sales to, oh no, I think this is my calling. I guess I
What
do
was I
sales
thinking?
now. Yeah. Um, but it was like I was in a super toxic culture. I found myself in many toxic cultures, like teaching really, outdated tactics. A lot of people still like, lying, manipulating, kind of like bullying prospects, a lot of like sexual harassment. I did like bad behavior, right? Like racism and sexism, just ugh.
Ugh.
Kind of what you would imagine those like really toxic boiler room sort of
Yeah.
situations reeking of. And I experienced all of that. But because I am just this innately stubborn person, instead of being like, this is terrible, I'm leaving, I was like, bet I will show you. I will do this job. I will do it better than you, and then I will become your boss. So I did that instead.
Now through that, and was this in some of the because you talked about toxic cultures and all maybe the old school tactics, which
Yeah, yeah.
unfortunately still exist to some degree today, unfortunately in some businesses.
Hmm.
Were you now taking the reins of some of those people within those toxic environments that gave you an opportunity to make some change, or were you now looking for other organizations where you could actually spread your wings further and really have an impact?
No, unfortunately, I didn't actually realize how toxic the environment was that I started in until many years later. I stayed there for a long time.
Okay.
Um, and I think part of it was that I was just like, I guess this is just how it is. I guess this is what it takes to like survive in the big city. And so I just, yeah, like head down, brute force. I was like, I'm gonna make it. I'm not gonna fail. So I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make it. And through that, it's how I developed the sales philosophy that I teach now, which is earn the right. Because I was like, this feels gross and icky, and I'm not going to leave here, which means I need to figure out how to both reject some of those like old ways of working, some of those toxic ways of working, and then find like forge my own way. But I have to forge my own way and still get deals. Like I have to like you have rainbows and sunshine and all of
Yeah,
that, but like if I'm not closing revenue, it doesn't matter how high and mighty I am about my values and what I think
correct.
good looks like in sales. So it really like it forced me to double down on things that maybe felt uncomfortable, I lean into things that felt uncomfortable, like really embracing like empathy and active listening and curiosity, which, like, let's be honest, at the time, like circa 2008, 2009, if
Yeah.
you put those as bullet points on your CV, you would have been deemed unhireable.
Correct. Correct. Yes.
Like, for sure.
Because they're key traits of things like emotional intelligence, and we didn't want those. We wanted closers.
Yes. We wanted hunters and closers and whatever, rock stars and ninjas. So it's so true. And then I had only been in that job for 6 months, 6 months. And my boss got like very unceremoniously let go. And then the next day I got promoted.
Right.
Six
Without
months into
without
my first
asking.
corporate sales job. With Yeah, I mean, like, I had managed people and I was already like I'd already gotten one promotion and I was like jockeying for promotions.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a surprise.
Okay.
And then suddenly I was managing a team of six, and all of them were older than me, like by a decade. And all of them had, as a result, like at least 10 years more sales experience than me. And we were talking a little bit off camera about like how important I think the role of trust is in sales
Mm.
leadership. And so much of what informs that like deep, deep belief and certainty now is
Mm.
how very, very wrong I got it in those
Yeah.
early days as a new sales manager.
Which is a great learning, a great lesson. So 6 months in, you've been promoted, even though you might have been jostling, even though you might have been preparing for the next role, it came as a bit of a surprise. Let's just talk a little bit about the challenges around that, particularly when you mention you've got people who are 10 years more experienced, older, and dare I say it, might be having certain ideas about whether a female should be in a position of sales leadership. And was there any vindictiveness or competitive nature that perhaps the people in the team thought, how did you get this? You didn't deserve this. Why didn't I get this role? And were there challenges like that you
Yeah.
had to deal with and overcome?
Unfortunately, there were, luckily not from my direct reports,
Yeah,
because
okay.
I had been on the team before I became the manager, and none of them wanted to move into management. Like, they were
Okay.
quite happy just like showing up, doing the work, getting the paycheck going. And they had seen me. I mean, I had been grinding for those 6 months.
Yeah.
So they had seen me smash records, they'd seen me doing the work. So they were fine. They were like, what, like, whatever. Like, yeah, we could have gotten a worse manager. So like they like, yeah, yeah, they were fine. They certainly were not my detractors. But there were other people on the sales floor that felt like they deserved what I got
Yeah.
and were I mean, and they were like just as new as I was and had like fewer sales. And I had been managing people, like
Hmm.
pretty large teams, all like for the 6 years prior to that, like through, like through my college years.
Yeah.
And so like I was not new to leadership, I was new to sales leadership. Um, but yeah, like, but whatever, jealousy happens. And I think that's particularly true in like hyper competitive environments. And
Mm.
sales is a competitive profession, but that particular job was like going out of its way to breed that like competition over collaboration
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah.
Um, but then I just doubled down. I was like, that's fine, but sales, you have numbers to show. So I will make sure that my team hits their quotas. I will make sure I hit my quota. Like, I will make sure the numbers show that I deserve exactly what I was given,
Hmm.
and that like I'm going to make sure that my team is amazing. So honestly, it wasn't that bad. Like, that got
Yeah.
nipped in the bud pretty soon. Not that it like, of course, it like came up again throughout my career with different people, because there's always going to be somebody that feels like they deserve what you
Sure.
got. But that wasn't so bad. I think honestly I was my own enemy in a lot of ways, Darren, because I like there weren't any other women in sales leadership. And so I was just modeling what all of the men were doing,
Yeah.
which was like pretty aggressive and pretty direct. And I have a very direct personality and like direct communication style. So it wasn't that much of a reach, but I
Yeah.
literally would describe myself at the time as an iron fist velvet glove leader.
The Iron Fist velvet glove.
And I really thought I was doing something. Like I would like say it and then be like, "Oh, you are nailing this." I was in fact not nailing it. So it took me a few months of being like, I'm telling these people what they need to do. Like I told them how to fix that. Why aren't they listening to me? And just being like really mad that folks wouldn't take me at my word and do exactly what I was telling them to do
Yeah.
simply because I was their manager.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then that's when I started coming to some conclusions of my own that maybe there was a missing element, there was a missing piece of the puzzle that I needed to figure out before I could demand that these people trust and follow me.
Yeah. And so with that realization, was it something that you tangibly then started to work on yourself? Was there some modeling of other mentors, people you'd been speaking with, people you'd been following, or was it just something intuitively you thought, you know what, this doesn't feel like the right way to do it. There's got to be a different way. There's got to be a better way.
I would say it was a bit of humility,
Okay.
like having to like, have that like come to Jesus moment
Yeah.
with myself that like just because you hit this early sales record, just because you got promoted fast, like, just because you did all these things before this job,
Mm.
like these people don't care about that, Leslie. And so like it was a bit of a humble thyself
Yeah.
moment. And then a lot of Googling.
And back in the day, Google would have been full of accurate information as well, probably a little bit more accurate than perhaps today.
I think maybe I did like an Ask Jeeves search. I don't know, Darren. I don't know. But like the environment itself lacked psychological safety and it was very much like a competition over collaboration. So there were not people, like
Yeah.
I did not feel safe
Yeah.
asking other people for help. I did not feel safe admitting to other people that I saw these weaknesses in myself or that I was struggling. And unfortunately, like we didn't have LinkedIn. Like
Yes.
LinkedIn was brand new. We didn't have all these communities. So there also weren't really like external communities I could go to
Yeah.
find mentors. So I was just like watching a bunch of YouTubes and like doing self-training and self-courses. And one of the things, like now I'm a huge fan of Kim Scott.
Hmm.
And so what I was trying to figure out and where I was tracking to was the concept that she calls, which is like, the caring deeply matched with the direct communication, and that's all under
Yeah.
the body of like radical candor or compassionate candor. So that's
Yeah.
what I was trying to figure out how to get there, but it was like probably like 2 years of like getting it wrong and like
Mm.
stumbling on the track of being like, oh, okay, this type of management actually feels a lot better
Yeah.
and I don't wake up in the middle of the night with stress dreams any longer. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm probably more in my body and more in my way of how I want to like treat people. But it took me a while to get there.
Nice. I'm so glad you shared that because the question I had then was you mentioned before that was often a toxic environment, and many people are living in a toxic environment, right? So it's
Yeah.
internal competition. You also mentioned that perhaps there wasn't a lot of people who you could confide in because typically you'd have people who you were talking with who were trusted advisors, but also competitors, internal competitors. I was curious in terms of your sales leader, so the sales director or who had the overarching responsibility for the entire team. What was their approach to this whole thing? Was it more purely about the numbers, or was there a little bit of grace or a little bit of flexibility that they gave you to evolve into the role? But or was it more about the numbers, the numbers, the numbers, and you're almost like this secret agent at night doing all this Googling to try and find a different way, but still delivering the numbers?
Yeah, the latter for sure.
Okay.
It was like numbers are you're fired. They would say things like you're only as good as what you did last month. I mean, like it was. It was the numbers. Like let me paint this picture for you, for our lovely listeners. Um, High-rise office building in downtown Chicago. And so you walk in and you're like, I have made it. I have my key card. Like this is so glamorous. And then the elevators open onto this floor. And it smells a bit like a locker room of people that play hockey, maybe to be more specific. Um, no computers at the desks unless you're a manager.
Okay.
It's just stacks of paper. And like, folks, this was not that long ago. Like,
Yeah.
this wasn't like the 80s. Like, computers were everywhere. Computers were a standard. So it was stacks of paper, and then a phone.
Yeah.
Or like maybe, I don't know, some like chewed upon pens. And not even like a phone with a headset, like a phone with like an impossibly tangled cord. And they didn't want to pay for us to have enough storage in our email for us to send large attachments. So when you wanted to send a proposal, you had to fax it over to people.
Facts.
And when you wanted to send an email, you had to go to like one of the shared computers
Oh,
to
wow.
send your email or like update the CRM, homegrown CRM, obviously. So they could probably like skirt some data rules. Who knows? I was young and naive and I just didn't understand how problematic it was. But like, yeah, they did not care that I wanted to figure out like how to sell and how to lead in a way that didn't make me like physically sick to my stomach with anxiety. They cared whether or not I was delivering quota.
Yeah.
And 100%, if at any time I stopped delivering quota, I would have been fired on the spot.
Yeah. So high pressure environment. And when you look at that, what you just described, probably not an environment that enables high performance or giving resources to enable high performance. So um, you've obviously done very well in terms of that environment to get through there. What I'd love to do is just talk about what specific strategies you might have employed, giving that the top line revenue numbers and the sales were I guess, the benchmark. But underneath that, some of the things that you worked on that, whether this happened over time, whether there was anything you implemented that had almost an instant sort of paradigm shift for the team, to the point where you now get to the stage now where you talk a lot about the fact that, hey, we've got to earn the trust to lead our team first. Don't just expect the team to follow us because we are the leader on the hierarchy. Just talk
Yeah.
about that process and any specific strategies that you developed in relation to that.
Yeah. You know what was such an interesting dichotomy in that job is that they had an extremely strong training culture.
Wow.
I know, Darren,
Wow.
it does not really make sense. Um, and it was like, you had your 3 days of classroom training and then it was like, get on the phones, like you're making calls on day four. But like there was a lot of appetite and a lot of support for ongoing training. And it was a huge real-time coaching culture.
Right.
Like that was the benchmark. And so I think often that real-time coaching culture, because of this like high pressure, sort of low psychological safety
Mm.
environment, was just like the obnoxious aggression, like over, and I fell into this trap too, like, barking orders and telling people what they did wrong while you're whispering their calls on an open sales floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was also like a lot of really good coaching that happened as well. And people, including myself, grew their sales skills extremely, extremely fast because you were just getting constant training, constant coaching, like constant support. So it would so it was a bit of a dichotomy, but I think a real positive is that taught me the value of coaching,
Hmm.
especially one-on-one coaching. And so I was able, like I was struggling to develop my kind of like leadership skills,
Yeah.
but I was becoming a really, really, really good coach really fast. And that was also enabled by the fact that they had a pretty advanced tech stack for the time because they already had conversational intelligence tools.
Right.
like back in
Okay.
2008. So I could whisper on all the calls, which for people that maybe aren't the elder millennial plus genre, whisper meaning I could hear my seller and I could hear the prospect, but I could put it so that my seller could only hear me. So I
Yeah.
could whisper questions to ask back to them to help guide them through the calls. We could do post-call coaching, like we had all the call recordings, we had all of the data of like, how many calls, how many of those were pickups, how much talk time.
Mm,
So we were also bolstered by a huge amount of data, which like that was not
mm,
the norm at the time. And so then that fed back into being able to have a really, really strong rep specific coaching culture of saying, like, hey, I'm looking at the average on the floor, and their talk time for a call that becomes a next step is 6 minutes.
mhm.
And if I look at all of your average talk time, it's either like 2 minutes or 30. So like let's see what's going on here. Like I'm listening to this 30-minute call and like that didn't become a meeting. It was just like a yap session. And then for all of these 2-minute calls, like I'm seeing like so it was it was a real dichotomy. Like
Yeah.
the appetite for coaching and for continuous improvement paired with the access to data.
Mm.
I think like that was a real game changer in that I think it gave me extra space to become the leader I wanted to be because I was able to be a great coach for my team much sooner than I was able to be a great leader for them.
And how are the people in the team? Because you mentioned before that a lot of them were 10 years more experienced than you in
Yeah.
sales. And you're creating this on the spot one-on-one coaching, which by the way, not enough organizations are promoting coaching of their sales leaders to do within their team. How was that? How was that accepted? And did you find there was a bit of resistance, or the fact you'd built up a rhythm of coaching that helped these guys get some good results, they were more receptive to it? And did it ever get to the stage where they were actively seeking coaching from you versus you just being there to be the coach?
Yeah, I either offboarded or fired most of that team within the year.
I love it. Love it. Because I didn't meet the culture requirements.
Um, like honestly, because being in sales for 10 years doesn't mean you're good at sales.
I offboarded it all. Fired
And like
within 12
I
months.
I wanted a team. So like the ones that were like they just didn't want to work for me,
Yes.
that's fine. Like
Yep.
go work for somebody else. Like
Yep.
I'm not gonna fight you and force you to work for
Yep.
me. Not in
Yep.
that environment where there were like plenty of other managers and like they could go elsewhere. It wasn't like they were, actively trying to take me down. It wasn't malicious. They just weren't going to have it. They weren't going to hear it from
Sure.
me. I wasn't the manager for them. Fine, whatever, go work for
Yep.
somebody else. And then some of them were like, frankly, not capable
Yep.
of being consistent performers. And a lot of
Hmm.
that is because they refused to take coaching and training. Like they felt like they knew what they were doing and they had a way. And even though it did not get them any results, they were just so confident that if they
Yeah.
just kept doing it, maybe something would change. But that then gave me the opportunity to hire in my own team,
Yep.
hire in and grow my own team because at that point I think I was up to like maybe I was already up to like 12 direct report headcount at that time. So my team had grown quite a bit. And something that I really hired for was that like tenacity that allows people to be highly coachable
Yep.
and to hear coaching. And because I was also really working hard to show them that I cared deeply about them as humans and
Yes.
about their goals outside of work, not just professionally or not just like tracking to their quota, it gave me a lot more space to like demand that they be coachable, or this was like if they are not a coachable person, then this is not the right job
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah. which is really interesting because I'm a big fan of John Maxwell, and I often refer to him in terms of the leadership programs I do, whether it be sales or non-sales groups that I work with. And what you just said there is the caring factor is probably one of the most important, if not the most important thing from a person's perspective when they look at their leader, because the first question they'll be asking is, do you care about me as a person? And I often say to sales leaders in particular, do you know why your team work for you, why they work for this organization, and why they keep coming back? What do you know about their family? What do you know about their hobbies? What do you know about the stuff they do outside of work? And I think, well,
Yeah.
man, that's what's that got to do with them delivering the numbers? And I said it's got everything to do with it because you're actually leading the person, you're not leading the title. So if you know stuff about people, then you can help remind them as to why they do things when the inevitable troughs start to happen, right? That creates trust and that creates psychological safety. So my question is, when you were going through that process, did you see that the overarching environment within the company was starting to change because you were changing it, or were you just changing and focusing on your own ecosystem because you were trying to create I mean your own method for want of a better term and but still deliver
Yeah.
the number to the business.
That's so kind of you to think that I had just a massive ripple effect on the company. No, I was able to affect my business unit. I
Okay.
think my business unit was fundamentally better. But no, I mean it's a global corporation. They had
Yeah.
offices in like 38 cities. It was like a 5,000 person company. No, I did what I could, and I'm proud of the work that I did. And I think like something that you said, one of the big realizations that I had about understanding what mattered to people outside of work is that it is not enough just to be like, hey, what are you going to spend that paycheck on? Like, what are your hopes and your dreams? The most important work I would argue that you can do as a leader is show that you care enough that you earn the right to ask these people, your colleagues, to share their dreams with you, and that you then care enough to remember them and to come back to them and to acknowledge that while the paycheck is important, the paycheck isn't important because they want to go spend it like popping bottles at the club.
Mm,
90% of the time, it was to pay off their mom's mortgage, to pay off their college debt, to buy their kid a car, to send, to go on a family vacation. Like the things that the money bought, the things that made the hard work worth it were very focused on the good that they were going to be able to put back into their family, their community.
yeah.
So it was a yeah, it was a process.
Yeah.
I think like continuing to show up to care deeply as a, I don't know, like as like a foundation versus as an act. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and I do, because I will say there are sales leaders out there that talk a lot about trust, but they don't necessarily walk the walk. So they'll talk about, hey, I trust you. I want to create this psychological safety. My doors are always open. I'm always here to share with you, but there's conditions attached. And when you are tested, will you remember things? When you are tested, will you serve? When you are tested, will you be humble? And will you take and put your hand up because it's happening on your watch? People will test you. Now, whether they'll test you directly because they don't believe you, often because they've been conditioned by other people in other environments that, hey, don't trust because it's all conditional, it's all for the sales leader in the company, but they'll test you. And if you pass the
Yeah.
test, then I know that I've got a person here who does care about me. They are interested in helping me become a better version of myself in this business to make a better contribution. And I'm more likely to now follow them because it's genuine. And in Australia, we call it often the bullshit meter. We have really good bullshit meters in Australia, and most people can detect whether the person in front of them is acting or whether they're genuine. Big difference.
Mm.
There's a huge difference, and it's a feeling people get.
Yeah, like if you are saying trust is important because that's the performance you think you're supposed to put on, those are the words you think you're supposed to say,
Yeah.
or are you really coming from a place of genuine care and you're going to put in the work to
Yes.
earn the trust?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Yeah.
Because you think about it, and you mentioned it before, talking about, resumes back in 2008, 2009. If you put curiosity, empathy, and all those sort of softer type words on the resume, people are thinking, "What are you? You're not. We need hard closers, right?" But when you think
Yeah.
about what those core behaviors are, they are the cornerstone of creating trust within an environment that is psychologically safe, where people feel safe. And if they feel safe, they're more likely to choose to want to follow you because of how you make them feel in that environment. That is something that a lot of leaders take for granted, I'll say, based on my experience, but it's something that could be literally a superpower if we know how to tap into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I will, in the spirit of vulnerability and truth and authenticity, like I will be the first to admit that I still default back into obnoxious aggression, into
Hmm.
like barking orders and being like, you should follow me, you should do what I say because that's what you get paid for.
Mm.
Do the work. That's why you get the paycheck. And even now, like after putting so much time, like doing the books and doing the therapy and doing the work and all of it, I still will find myself reverting to those like old behaviors and those old habits. And I think particularly now with this newer group of sellers coming into the workforce with like the younger
Yep.
millennials, the Gen Z, it is more important than ever to remember that the paycheck is enough to get them in the door and to have them check the boxes. Like let's
Yep.
just be honest. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying like let's be honest with ourselves. A
Hmm.
paycheck is going to get their butt in the seat and they are going to check the boxes.
Mm.
They're never going to go above and beyond unless they believe in you and in how much you care about them and their
Yep.
ability to get what is important to them. And what I'm seeing, at least, and tell me if you see the same, is that for these younger people, like rarely what is important to them is like climbing the corporate ladder or making $1 million. Like what's important to them is like, how can I get enough flexibility to work a 4-day work week?
That's it. That's it. And that's not to any way, shape, or form diminish the fact they still want to achieve because they're still ambitious. Their just definition of
Yeah.
ambition is probably different. Their
Yeah.
definition of success is often different. So the this and look, to be honest, my definition of success has changed over the years as well. Because when I was first brought into a large corporate, I used to think, wow, I'd like to be the sales director like that person until I actually found out a little bit about what he actually does and who he actually was. I'm thinking he's the last person I want to be following. So the success is not necessarily the title. The success comes from fulfillment of what you're achieving and the service you're providing,
Mm,
and you get recognition for that. So that's why I always say what you need to be focused on is, can you be sustainable? Can you be consistent?
mm,
Can you have people within your team who choose to want to come back because they want to follow you because of how you make them feel, because you are a person of character? So that is the format.
mm,
And you can still be really highly competitive. And as you said, you might default back to, you need to get this done, but you might earn the right to do that because of the person you are and the relationships you've built. That people know that, oh shit, if Leslie says this, it means that I need to pull my finger out and actually increase my level of discretionary effort because she cares, because she's got that sledgehammer, but it's got the velvet cover and she's going to hit me with it, but it's not going to leave
mm.
shoes.
Can we stay on that piece of sustainability
Please.
for a second? Because I love that. Particularly reflecting on my own career, because I did not structure my career in a way that was sustainable. Like I burned out like to the ground, fiery flames, like that poor little dog sitting in a house on fire saying, it's fine. Everything's fine. That was me, like not once, not twice, but 3 times, maybe 3.5 times. I think the half is like what most people experience when they say burnout. For me, it was like, it was a little dodgy for a while. Touch and go throughout my career.
Yeah.
And I did not figure out that the sustainability piece was even important to me until like, I don't know, like maybe my mid 30s.
Okay.
So I feel like I know you're interviewing me on this podcast, but like honestly, that was something I really struggled with, and I know I'm not alone. So like, what? how would you tell people to approach like building a sustainable career?
Um, for me, it comes down to knowing what you want to achieve. What is the definition of success, and not being at the mercy of what other people define as success. Because a lot of people, particularly in sales, they'll say achieving number one status or overachieving target is the definition of success. I always talk to people about making progress over perfection. So if you're making progress, please don't compare yourself to anybody else. You will be held accountable for the targets, and we have to achieve those. But I'm more interested in making sure that you understand what the definition of success is, and then what are the behaviors and the characteristics that you want to develop over time. Because that's what I'm going to measure you on. That's what I'm going to work for, because I know that is going to be sustainable. I want to make sure that if people were in my team, that they not only enjoy coming to work, they enjoy making a contribution, they get the necessary recognition if that's something they want, but they also have the characteristics that they are going to be marketable in any industry, in any sized
Mm,
organization, because of who they are. So it's more about working on the person rather than the skills of sales, for example. That, you know what, you can go into a finance company and I know that I'll have confidence that you can actually do really well in that. If you go into a mining company, I know you'll be able to do that because you know what you stand for. You know what the definition of success is for you. And I do know that if you do that, it will take some learning because there might be some new elements of the business you need to learn, but you'll be sustainable and that's successful.
I like that. I like that. Like something that that reminded me of that I say to my clients a lot is coach to the person, not the deal. Because like deals come and go, but if you coach those fundamental skill sets to the person, that felt sort of in the vein
Yeah.
of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Follow-up question, Darren. Oh, how the tables have turned.
Hang on, whose podcast is this again?
I know, I know. So here's a trap that I fell into, and this is what led me to burnout as a leader,
Yes.
is that I always put my team ahead of myself. And so in an effort to give them a safe space, in
Yeah.
an effort to make sure they felt heard and they were hitting their goals, I would stay in environments where, like, honestly, the best way I could have led was to lead them out the door, or I would be putting in like the 80 hours a week to make sure that like everything was, good for them so they could hit quota. Where's the balance?
Great question. My personal experience, my first 90 days when I moved from being an individual contributor to a sales leader, I nearly burnt out myself. And what I thought the best way to serve my team, because I'm very big on servant leadership, the best way to serve my team was to create the environment as you've just described, to help them be as successful as they possibly could be, which meant that I'd do a lot of things for them. I would open doors for them. I'd make introductions. I'd maybe revise some proposals, maybe write executive summaries. If they came to me with problems, I would have the solution and I would provide the solution and they would then therefore solve the problem. What I found out though, I was creating codependency. And
Mm,
it wasn't until a mentor came in and said, "Mate, what are you doing? If you keep doing this, you're not going to be any good to anybody because you can't be all things to all people." So he
yeah.
said, "You need to start to create an independent environment where you start to teach your people resourcefulness. Don't just give them the resources." Now, you can set a great environment for high performance and set really big expectations, and you can be there to serve your team, but you can't do everything for them. You have to teach them to think for themselves and start coming up with own solutions. Because here's the thing, when you're not there, what happens to the team? Do they sit around and wonder, oh, I can't do anything. I've got to wait until Darren comes back or Leslie comes back because I need to ask them the question before I take this form of
Yeah.
action? No, no. You want to teach them these are the principles, this is the framework we're working on. You have the resourcefulness, act on it, right? Now, it meant that sometimes you might think, well, my team doesn't need me anymore. Well, they do. They just need you at a higher level. So there's this balance between I want to drive high performance. I also want them to be autonomous. I want them to be empowered. I want them to be independent. But it means if I do that, I know that coming back to that sustainability piece, the ones that do have the fortitude to think for themselves and take affirmative action are more likely to do that proactively. And when they do come up against roadblocks, we'll have a high quality conversation. But even then, I won't give them the answer. I'll actually take them through a thinking process that enables them to come up with the answer that I might then verify. Hey, that sounds like a great thing. Go and do that, and let's see what happens. And so I don't need to then give them the answers, but they look at me as the person who is now giving them the empowerment to be themselves, to take proactive action. And that's how I
Yeah.
found I struck the balance, and it's pretty much what I teach now in terms of how to sales leaders really build high performing teams.
Yeah. I love that. Like I like the words of like giving them like empowering them, giving them autonomy. Like that is like sort of the foundation of enablement. I heard somebody say last week that if you want to get trust, you got to give trust. And like that's what I was thinking of when you were sharing all of that. I still vividly remember the first time that I went on vacation and I didn't like I logged off. And
How was
like
that for
because
you?
I'd never done that before. I'd never
Yeah,
done that before because I was so afraid of not being needed. I was so afraid that if my team didn't need me, it meant that like I just wasn't needed. Like at the like bye, like we can fire her. She was gone for a
yeah,
whole week and her team
yeah,
operated just fine. And I still remember I was probably I don't know, 6 or 7 years into I was some years into my career before I went on holiday and I was like, I'm gone. Like, here's my out of office contacts. And it wasn't just that I like didn't check my email. It was that like I had a mindset shift that enabled
yeah.
me to do that. And it was away from if my team doesn't need me, that I'm not a good manager, to if my team can't exist without me for a week because I have not set up the systems and the repeatable processes and like the skill sets, mindsets for them to exist without me for a single week, then I'm not a good
Correct.
manager. So that's, yeah, I definitely saw like what you described. I saw that transition in my own
Yeah,
career.
and I repeated the same mistake when I moved to a different company because I remember 6 months in taking a holiday and I said to my director, I'm going to take the family on a 2 week vacation, or I think it was a 1 week vacation. And I'm leaving my mobile phone at home and I'm leaving my laptop at home, right? Because I need to log off. And he looked me square in the eye and he said, Darren, are you telling me that you are going to abandon the business? And it was at that
Sir,
moment, it was at that moment I decided, yep, I thought I would like to be in a role similar to you. You've now qualified for me that this is the last role that I want. Because if I'm in that sort of environment, you know what? No, not for me. Not for me.
good for you. Way to have your goals clear.
Off. You got to. So, hey, this has been a great conversation. I'm also conscious of time because we've nearly we've nearly got an hour.
What time is it? 10 p.m.? Hard to say. I think it's still light outside.
It's light here because it's Friday morning. And it's probably, let me guess, it's probably about 6:15. Is it still light in Chicago? It probably would be
Yeah, let's
now.
see. It is. It's only 7:15. It's not that late.
7:15. There you go. That's okay. So I just want to just touch briefly. Your book's coming out on the 5th of August. It's called Profit Generating Pipeline. Um, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you a question as a bit of a wrap up. There's lots of books out there in the marketplace, and there's lots of books on sales. There's lots of books on sales leadership. What is it about your book that you think people should invest and do themselves a favor, but their teams a favor in getting a copy of the book?
Yeah. Well, first of all, read all the books, folks. You can't read too many books. So maybe don't pick only mine. Pick 10. Um, I think sure there's an entire part. There's 7 chapters on sales leadership foundations, but interestingly, I don't think that it is a sales leadership book because I don't think that I am a sales leadership expert. I think I am somebody who has struggled their way through leadership, and I'm sharing what I've found on the journey in case it is helpful, validating, informative for other people.
Hmm.
So like maybe that is your reason. But I would say if you are outbounding and you are wondering why outbound feels harder than it ever has before, the answer is it's because it is.
Yeah.
But this book has a proven formula to make it easier. It's not a
Yeah.
silver bullet, it's not a shiny object. Like outbound's still going to be hard, but I
Mm.
do have a 9-step blueprint that the part 2 of the book walks folks through that gives them answers to help them blend quantity and quality and personalize at scale. Like it has a lot of the answers to the things that make outbound feel so hard right now.
Yeah. Love it. And that was not a canned answer because that was not a canned question because I
No.
gave you that
Did
question
you did you
without
show
any.
the people your robust notes?
Yes, well, for people who I showed you, Leslie, that there's my notes. And for the people who are listening to this, I'm just holding up a blank piece of paper. And for the people that listen to these episodes, they know that I'm a bit rogue and I don't have a list of questions that I typically ask, but that's how we go. So the key point
I
there
think we
is,
did okay.
I
I
think we
put
did
you
as
on the
well.
spot and started asking you
Well,
questions.
you did. That is a great sales philosophy right there. Just asking good penetrating questions and put it back on the person. Get the other person to talk. Um,
Well, hey, if I have an expert on the line, I might as well take advantage.
there you go. The expert wasn't available, so they put me in front of you as well instead. Um, so what I'm going to recommend is people get a copy of the book. As you rightly said, there's lots of books out there, and please just do yourself a favor because we are responsible for our own development. Whether you're a sales professional, a sales leader, a person that's interested in trying to increase your influence in the marketplace,
Yeah.
go and read books. But this one in particular is a great one, and I would endorse it because even I knew this before we press record with some of the stories you were sharing with me with your exploits down in Australia last when you were here. Is you're a good person and you passed the BS meter test, the bullshit meter test. So
Well, I'm
that is
Australian
good.
approved.
You are Aussie approved, Aussie endorsed. And
Yay.
it helps that you mentioned a couple of other colleagues as well. So that means that we're in really good esteemed company.
Yes,
Um,
we are in the same circle. If people are going to go get the book, because I know we're going live like ASAP, I will mention that if they go to salesledgtm.com/book, if they get it there, they can go back and put in their confirmation number. And I have like $400 worth of freebies, like a virtual launch party where I'm giving away a bunch of stuff, live launch parties, like a behind the scenes thing, access to my book club if you want sort of an accountability group to read more books. So you can get it anywhere, like it's available anywhere. But if you want the
yeah,
free stuff, go to
perfect. So that's
salesledgtm.com/book.
salesledgtm.com/book. I'll put that in the show notes. Now, Leslie, if people want to connect with you, as I just did this morning or yesterday afternoon for you, um,
I was so confused when that came in. I was like, how are we not already connected?
well, I know because particularly
Well,
you.
we just became best friends, I guess.
Well, we have because you shared something about, I won't even go there about what you, what you shared on the bridge in Sydney. Um, but you're a LinkedIn top voice as well. So I can't believe we haven't been connected up until now. So we are. So LinkedIn is another place that I would recommend people to connect with you and plug into your content. Because we
Yes,
are
please.
very
Yeah.
much, even though we're on the other side of the world, it seems to be we are kindred spirits trying to talk about and prophesize, ethically, of course, the right principles around what we're trying to do. So, is there any other place that people can connect with you? Like
I am everywhere.
you have a
I am
TikTok
a
account?
chronically online person, Darren. I'm on most places as at B2B sales coach. Like that's like
Okay.
my YouTube, Twitter, etc. And I also go on unhinged rants on TikTok at sales tips talk. So if people are looking for a bit of the flavor of what you got before we pressed record, you can follow me there. But LinkedIn is my main channel. I engage daily on LinkedIn and I have for like over 2,000 days. So if you're looking for like legit daily sales strategy techniques, foundations, go to LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Love it. Hey Leslie, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to do this. I know we were going to do this a little while ago, but circumstances meant that it couldn't happen, but so privileged to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for adding such a great amount of value. Good luck with the launch of the book. as again, I highly recommend people get hold of it. And thank you for being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Oh my God, thank you. And thank you to everybody who hung around and listened to our entire conversation. Appreciate all of you.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.